Yeah, after we go live, then it's live on Twitch and YouTube and Twitter and let's see.
The whole
Okay,
internet.
we are
The whole internet's watching.
online for
The internet's.
The whole internet's. All those tubes.
Let me double check YouTube real quick. And yep, that's live as well. So everybody, here we go. We're ready to go. Brody, do you want to start us up, or should Andrea actually do it this week?
Oh, I would. You want me to do it? Well, we'd love you to do it next time then, okay?
Okay.
No, I was just going to say, if he keeps saying Andrea, then everybody's going to think that's my name.
Oh, okay. We're not recording. Don't worry. We're just
In
live.
case you ever want to start a different career in some different career path, you can, it's like your stage name. So
Joseph can tell this is a legit operation here. Andrea, would you like to do the intro? Or would you like me to do the intro?
No, you start. I'll learn for next time.
Okay. All right. Recorded November 30th, 2022 at 3:08 Mountain Time. Good evening, good afternoon, hello, Rod, Andrea, and we'll get to our wonderful guest, Joseph, in just a second. Rod, Andrea, how are you doing today? What's going on? Back from the holidays, all stoked to be at work?
Andrea, you can go first. See, I even pronounced your name correctly.
You did. We're having a discussion on the fact that Andrea is the worst name in the world. It has 3 pronunciations: Andrea, Andrea, and Andrea. So it can always be wrong, but I'm an Andrea. But I had a great Thanksgiving. We went up to New York to hang out with my nephew, who's a freshman up in college up that way. And I ate entirely too much, though no turkey, and drank entirely too much. But that's another story for another time. What about you, Rod?
I had a wonderful time off. We talked about this last week, how much I absolutely enjoy the holidays, from sharing with my kids and our family. Let me show you something. Let me see if I can share this screen here real quick. Let's see. This is something we took. So this is my grandbaby's, my first grandboy, his second Christmas, but kind of the first one where he's actually, coherent of things going on around. Let me share my screen a little bit. Will this work? Yeah, this will work, I think. I don't know if you can see that or not. This was a picture we took at my mom's house, and this was like his first Christmas where he sees everything, he's coherent. He was actually putting up ornaments. He was watching everybody else and trying to put up ornaments by himself for the first time. So I took this picture, and then I kind of did some silly kind of artsy filter, and I went to Canva and printed it into in a real large poster. And I got a little frame, and that's what I'm gonna give my mom for Christmas. So
it totally looks like an actual Christmas card that you would send.
Yeah. So that arrived today. I thought that was super awesome. But no, had a really, really, really good time. I'm trying to think. Yeah, absolutely did eat too much. It's one of those things where you're going to eat too much, so you're consciously trying to avoid it. But so we go to my stepmom's house every Thanksgiving, and then like 2-3 hours later, we go to my mom's, and both of them cook these huge, fabulous meals. And if you, especially my mom, if you try not to eat her food, she's like, "What's wrong with you?" So you gotta at least eat something, or at least pretend. I wish she had a dog so I could shove some of it underneath the table and it could help me out, but that didn't happen. So, so that was good. The brand new Must Learn KQL shirts are out, right? Did you know that there's an actual KQL Christmas song?
No, Rod, would you like to sing it for us right now?
I wouldn't.
Okay.
I think maybe that's something we all need to work on. Maybe and I hesitate to mention this, but I will. We are going to have a special Christmas show called The Spirits of Security Shows Past. And we're going to invite some of our past guests on to talk about Christmas, what they're looking forward to and stuff like that. So that's just something for everybody. And we'll talk more about this. Maybe we can get somebody like Nathan Swift or Jing or somebody to actually sing the song. Maybe I'll try to talk them into it.
Well, just so you know, Rod, I'm still waiting for my KQLing caroling shirt. It has not arrived, and I ordered it how long ago?
I have that underneath here. I have it.
What are you, Superman? You got a costume on under a costume?
Yeah, it's just in
What's going on
case.
here?
So this is
Yeah.
a long shirt because the wife likes to keep it cold in the house, even when it's cold outside. But then if I have to go, exercise, I run a lot, so I'll just take the top shirt off, and yeah, everything
Always
I wear
prepared.
has KQL on it somewhere.
You're
That's sad,
branded.
I know, but
You gonna get a tattoo?
oh my goodness, I hadn't even thought of that. Huh.
Let's not.
You could do a fundraiser.
Yeah. Let's introduce poor Joe. He's been so quiet, Joseph.
Oh,
He's been
yes.
so quiet and patient.
Yes, let's do that. Yeah, I haven't done anything this week. I'm super busy. Don't worry about anything that Brody's doing. Everything's all good. Joseph, how are you? Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights show. We want to tell everybody the proper pronunciation of your name so that when our co-host comes on, he gets it wrong. What you do at Microsoft and what you want to talk about today.
Yeah, I'm doing really well. The proper pronunciation of my name is Joseph. I'm the Chief Security Advisor of Health and Life Sciences at Microsoft, and I've been with Microsoft. It's coming up to 4 years. Actually, I think I just passed 4 years.
Congrats.
Yeah, that's great. So we got a baby Crystal coming up at 5. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I get something.
Nice. Excellent. And so your role sounds really interesting. Do you want to talk about what you do day to day, week over week, like what your responsibilities are? What's the deal, Joseph? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, initially the role was for former chief information security officers, primarily those that focus on specific industries, or if you don't really focus on an industry, you get a region, which would be a region of the country, a region of the world, etc. My focus is health and life sciences, probably because I was in the medical field before I entered cybersecurity IT. And I worked for close to 15, if not more, years at a medical devices pharmaceuticals company where I ultimately became chief information security officer. So that was a fantastic journey. But what I do here at Microsoft day to day, really just advising customers. Typically the focus is on payers, healthcare providers, pharmaceutical companies, labs, those types of customers. So I advise them of all things, depending on what their maturity is. Sometimes it's what I'm about to talk about today, which is zero trust. Sometimes it's just about migrating to the cloud, how many other customers are doing it, and sometimes it's just about how to secure workloads, how to defeat ransomware, prevent it, what to do in case of a crisis. How to do investigations, those types of things.
Cool. And so are you involved in the sales funnel or cycle early on, or do you also engage with customers who want to know more about how to get more value out of their current like E5 or E3 subscription? What does that look like in terms of new versus existing customers for those?
I would say 80% new and 20% existing. So it's kind of an 80-20 split. I mean, my charter really is to focus on the new customers or the customers who have been customers for a while, but are still running a lot of on-prem and haven't really embraced Microsoft security and compliance. So we're always trying to get them, jazzed up about the Defender suite and Priva and, Entra and all these other great technologies that we have that integrate together.
All these other buzzwords, Priva and Purview.
Is it Entra or Entra?
Great question.
Azure or Azure? Who knows?
SIM. That's another one. Rod and I always.
I know.
Yeah.
I always, even in sessions, I always say SIEM or SIM, however you pronounce it. Who cares? Because obviously I'm going to say it wrong to half of the audience. They're going to it's not SIEM anyway.
But we have SIEMs different, right? Can't SIEM be permissions management and SIM be security, identity, and event or incident and event management?
Really depends.
I know. It's a big debate.
There's my Microsoft answer. It depends.
Yeah, exactly. It depends. Joseph, Andrew, Rod, do you have any questions before I have a follow-up? I don't want to pull an Edward here and take.
No, go with the flow. I have some other questions about zero trust, I think, but no, I don't want to take you out of the flow. You know what I mean? I don't want to.
Okay.
Stop.
All right.
Yeah, okay. Time for a commercial.
Feel free to cut me off. Feel free to cut me off. How do you pronounce Clippy? Excellent question in chat. Love that question. Thank you for that. We all love Clippy here at Microsoft. Side note, our Discord channel, which you should totally join if you haven't been there yet, we have a bot going up, and I'm going to name it Clippy, and hopefully no one from CILA has a problem with that. It's just going to happen. That's going to be a fantastic addition to our community. Joseph, we often hear so I'm a delivery consultant. I work cybersecurity, various different technologies and solutions with various different customers across industry. I know you're specialized in health and life sciences. That's really awesome. Great industry to be in. How is the term zero trust received with new customers? Do they feel like we're trying to push a Microsoft methodology or a marketing term, or can you really get into the real pros and cons of the mindset? Because like you and I think our core folks here understand the mindset and what we're trying to get at when we say zero trust, but there's an underlying conversation I have with folks internally and externally where the term gets used so much it almost bleeds into marketing slang. So do you want to build on that a little bit and talk about the real value behind that mindset?
Yeah, it can. Of course, like most psychologists agree, negative experiences stand out more in my mind than positive experiences. But I usually know before I get on the phone, because I'll work with the security specialist on the account, how the customer might react to me saying zero trust. And so I want to say most of the time it's positive or it's just curiosity. But I have had chief information security officers say, "You cannot say zero trust to me. I don't want to hear it. It's marketing. It's a bunch of fluff. It doesn't really mean anything." And I'm like, "Well, slow down. It really does. There are different approaches to it, but it does mean something." But I'd say Microsoft's brand of zero trust, in my mind, has always been conditional access, right? Because we're not. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. So that's interesting to me, kind of sticking with that whole marketing stuff, because I think that's key and that's important, particularly when we approach customers. Zero trust is not a Microsoft thing, right?
Yeah, it's been around a long, long time.
It's not.
Right. A lot of customers, when you walk in as a Microsoft person and start saying zero trust, they expect this whole kind of marketing spiel. Here comes Microsoft zero trust products. Yeah, we have products, I guess, to kind of fill those gaps, but what do you hear, Joseph, from those customers, right? Along those lines, where they think it's something that's actually something we created.
Yeah, I always say we had a fashion company in the New York City area where I grew up called Sims, and he used to sell suits. And on his commercials, he used to say they were local. Educated consumers are best customer. And that's the way I feel too. If our customers done our homework, they're going to know that zero trust really was a term, I think, coined originally by Forrester. But it was before that, it was really a concept that kind of floated around in many different forums. But one of them was the Jericho Forum way back in 2003, 2004, which is now the Open Group. The Jericho Forum
Right.
either merged into or was acquired by the Open Group. But basically it was, how do we deperimeterize computing? That's really hard for me to say that word. But how do we tear down the walls? Hence the Jericho moniker. So the customers will either kind of embrace it and understand it and know what's under the hood of the term zero trust, because it's a big term. I mean, there's a lot in there. And one of the first things I usually say is that this is not a product. You can't go and get a zero trust SKU from Microsoft, right? It's a combination of technologies that integrate, they work together. And essentially what it is, if you're just going to break it down to an elevator pitch or the simplest possible explanation, it's assessing the risk of identities and possibly devices. I say possibly because if you're a bring your own device and you don't want to register your device to get examined, you can't assess the risk. So it's assessing the risk of the identity, the behavior of the identity, and assessing the risk of the device before granting access to resources.
Right. And I think it's a great evolution from the castle and moat mindset that maybe a lot of us are used to from back in the day on-prem environments, and still customers I work with today are looking to make that digital transformation, take advantage of cloud-based security technologies. We can't just assume that there's a trusted internal environment and then everything else outside is untrusted. We can't just assume that, or believe that the controls and the capabilities that we put in places for organizations across the board are enough either from external threats or internal threats to keep our data safe, our users safe, etc. And that notion of insider risk user, or that notion of misconfiguration, which happens so often, is I think at the heart of zero trust, where we're, another way of putting it, you said conditional access earlier. Another way of putting it is always verify, right? Always verify that traffic's legit, that identity's legit, or that asset is legit. You want to build on that, Joseph?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think back to the years before zero trust was a concept, and really before we had the technologies. Zero trust became a concept pretty early on. I was like anywhere between 2004 and 2014. You could say zero trust was kind of floating in the ether out there. But prior to that, and for those organizations who haven't embraced it yet, the way we would architect our networks, especially I work for a company called BBN. You may have heard of them. One kind of thing that a lot of folks don't know is that the Loft hacking group, most of their members were on the security team at BBN in Cambridge during the late 90s. It eventually became GTE Internetworking and got spun off, and parts of it became Verizon and Genuity, et cetera. But what BBN was is basically a labs company that designed a lot of what went into the early days of the internet, right? So they designed the first router, in collaboration with folks from Stanford, et cetera, and the military. But they got a lot of ARPA contracts back in the day, late 60s, early 70s. And it became one of the first ISPs. We're all familiar with AOL and Prodigy and those, but CompuServe. But BBM Planet was a ISP for quite some time. Remember the old dial-up days. And we also provide business services, et cetera. And our security staff existed of individuals like Mudge, Pete Zatko, Weld Pond, Chris Wysopal, Paul Nash. There was a whole bunch of, I'm not just name dropping here, but it was really, really interesting that one of the first things
I don't know who any of those people are, so.
No, Mudge? Come on, Andrea.
Yeah,
in the news drop names, but don't do a sports analogy either. I won't get that either.
So it was really interesting how they would talk about the crunchy center, like you had, the crunchy outer shell and the chewy center of the network. And anytime we'd stand up a new subnet, and all these subnets were purpose built, right? So you had your subnets for DHCP and DNS. You had other subnets that might have file and print services, other subnets that might have an ERP system on them. So what we would do is create these, what we call roach motels, to create a moat or a castle around these things. And that's before zero trust existed, but we were all very cognizant of the fact that all an attacker had to do was either impersonate somebody who had the rights to get into those roach motels, or do some sort of, not just impersonation, or just to do some sort of vulnerability trick against one of the pieces of technology that was guarding that moat, if you will, or guarding that castle wall. And you could pretty much get right in and do what you need to do. Whereas zero trust takes it to a different level. Zero trust doesn't rely on a defense, a perimeter defense. What it's doing is it's evaluating, it's very personal. It's like that personal relationship, the identity and the device will have with the conditional access engine. The conditional access engine is out there and exists in Azure Active Directory. It exists in Intune to determine, hey, has this user been up to something strange? Does this seem right? So it's very much like that adaptive authentication that we saw come out in the mid 2000s from RSA. It's like, okay, if they're able to answer these very specific questions, then we know they are who they say they are. Well, it's the same thing with zero trust. It's like, can they answer the multi-factor authentication? Are they logging in from a different place? And then as far as devices are concerned, the full device is evaluated. Are there vulnerabilities on this device that shouldn't be there? Are there older versions of applications that need to be upgraded? Are there basically applications that shouldn't be there? Are they there? And do you have to get right with your device before you're going to gain access to these resources? Now, you notice I didn't mention the network at all. And that's the thing that scares a lot of security professionals, because they've been so programmed to secure the perimeter.
Yeah.
You even hear that term used in, action films, secure the perimeter. That, we're not thinking about the interaction between the identity and the device and the resources on the other end. And as artificial intelligence, machine learning gets better and better, we can use cloud scale to make these just-in-time evaluations of risk. then we're going to be able to really, understand what we're allowing to access our resources.
So, Joseph, I would bet that most of the people listening and or watching this are fairly familiar with Zero Trust, since it's been around for a while. What is new that people may not be aware of when it comes to Zero Trust? And what do you think people are not doing that they should be doing?
Well, I'll answer the second one first because that's an easier question to answer. I've noticed customers kind of either dismissing Zero Trust altogether, sticking with, the older, I have a directory service behind the firewall that evaluates whether or not your password's correct. Right. And that's the only real ticket to admission that you need, is that you've got a correct username, correct password. Then you can pretty much go anywhere you're authorized to go. If you're on a private network and there's no segmentation, you can just go all over the place. Right. So there's no evaluation of, is that really Andrea? Is that really Brody? Is that really Rod? And is that the device they normally use? And okay, so that's the device they normally use. Is it clean? So the customers are not putting the pieces of technology together so that can happen. For example, I might have some customers who are, they're all in Defender for Endpoint. Defender for Endpoint is one of those technologies that will determine, what the endpoint looks like. Does it have malware on it? Has it been affected by ransomware? Does it look like it's been a part of command and control? Just where's that device been? Has it been using its Wi-Fi versus its Bluetooth, and all these little intrinsic things that can determine risk. Right, you're not going to get that with your traditional Active Directory. It's just not going to happen. And what they'll do is they'll just deploy Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, but they won't deploy the other components that will help that technology make a risk determination. And basically integrated with all the other technologies that are in the Microsoft suite or other suites. So, they can be combined with, that intel can be combined with CASB systems, with identity systems, with data transfer systems, all of those things, entry points like Defender for Office, which I would consider like a secure email gateway or secure Teams gateway, if you will. And the term gateway is kind of overused at this point because anything could be a gateway. So the short answer to that is that customers they're kind of confused. They really don't know, where to start. They're constantly being told different things by different vendors. And some of them are getting very, very frustrated by that. And then other customers I have just say, look, tell me what to do. I'm done trying to do it myself. I need individuals with experience that have, basically created this technology to solve this problem. Tell me what I should put in place to defend my enterprise.
Well, and that makes a good point. A lot of customers, number one, with the economy the way it is, but number two, customers are overwhelmed right now. A lot of teams are trying to do more with the teams that they have, right? What's the starting point for Zero Trust? Obviously, when I think about Zero Trust, I think about the different silos, the different pillars. But for a customer, maybe it's a small team, maybe it's an SMB. How do they get started? What's the first step that they can start to take advantage of this?
Yeah, and in my personal life, I work with SMBs all the time to help them out outside of work. And I can think of the latest one I've worked with. I would tell them to start with identity. Make sure that, yes, you probably have an internal identity. You have an Active Directory identity. But make sure that that identity is being synchronized up to the cloud, and try and rely less and less on Active Directory. I don't want to say get rid of Active Directory, but maybe that's kind of hidden in the message a little bit, because Active Directory really is an attack surface area that because of its legacy. It's from 1999. This is not throwing shade at any one technology, but it's quite legacy, and it has a lot of legacy holdovers to make it compatible with legacy applications. NTLM authentication's one, LDAP lookups are another. It doesn't natively use OAuth or any kind of modern authentication. So the first step is the more identity you can move to the cloud, so that the cloud is able to make those risk evaluations on your identity and enforce multi-factor authentication. That's an excellent start.
Right. For these organizations,
Sorry, Rod. Go ahead.
Yeah, for these organizations that are these SMBs that are interested, but maybe they can't convince management. How do they convince them? What's the approach here? Because and I approached this from a conversation that I had earlier today, and I had a couple weeks back. I was at a conference where most these IT pros, they're still heavily on-prem, right? Still using Active Directory. My colleague on my team, she was at a conference in New Zealand last week, and they're all SMBs. She said, zero trust. Well, first thing you need to do is turn on MFA. And they're like, why?
I hear it's the vegetable of cybersecurity.
Yeah.
The
They're like,
vegetable
why?
of
Why should I
cybersecurity.
turn on MFA? What's it going to benefit me? I trust everybody.
I love that.
Well, that's the first problem, right? You got to trust no one, right? And it's not because people have bad intentions. It's usually because they get impersonated, right? I'm not a big blame the victim person. But I mean, all the breaches I've seen as my time as CISO and as an advisor, I worked for Avanade for a time. As a security advisor, I ran a group of advisors in North America where we would see time and time again the breaches occur because of a hacker logging in as somebody else, not breaking it, right? It used to be, oh, they're going to exploit this web vulnerability, which, and I say that, sensationalized, but that's still a thing. That still happens. But if I'm an attacker or on a red team, what am I going to do? Am I going to try and tease away somebody's password, or am I going to try and use Metasploit to crack open a specific version of Apache, right? And then get caught doing it because there's some perimeter technology there that can detect my cracking of the Apache server that sits behind the firewall or the IPS.
Work
right?
smart, not hard, right? What's the lowest cost capability that you can leverage to get in, right? And if the identity is it, then why bother going after all of these potential web vulnerabilities or 0 days like you're calling out, Joseph? Good point.
Right. It's the Mission Impossible versus the cuckoo's egg, right? It's like, am I going to scale down a wall with ropes and try not to set off the lasers, or am I just going to pretend to be one of the bank employees or one of the jewelry store employees, right? And if I can, in the virtual world, I can do that without the way things are with username and password. It's really, really easy to do that. I don't have to show any biometrics, right? There's no multi-factor authentication that checks my face or checks my thumbprint, or potentially checks a certificate that lives on my FIDO2 YubiKey, right? So, that's the reason for MFA is that first of all, password reuse is absolutely rampant. And I still run into it today, even with my personal friends and family. Do you use
You can
the
count
same
me as
password?
a friend in that if you want.
Are you using the same password for corporate that you're using for Facebook?
No, I don't do
that. Well, it really doesn't matter because anybody can be exploited, right? Even if you're using your Fidelity password to log on to Microsoft. Well, God forbid, what if Fidelity is exploited? And I'm not saying they are or ever were, but in case like their password hashes get out into the open market, then someone's going to try your corporate account with what they saw to be your Fidelity password, right? And now I think Fidelity is enforcing multi-factor anyway. Most banks are, and most investment firms are. But that's the thing. I mean, you're really at the whim of whoever holds your password to make sure that they're not affected by any kind of attack, and those password hashes aren't grabbed. So the password reuse problem is probably one of the number one, what's not number one, but one of the primary factors to look at using MFA, because even if you're reusing your password, you got to rely on that second form of authentication for you to be impersonated.
Yeah, 100%. Noodle McToodle.
Yeah, Noodle in our chat for listeners out there. He's saying basically customer end user bases are getting
turn it on
MFA, but the admins, they don't need that, right? Because they're better than the regular users.
Admins
so let's just
need it more
exclude
so than
them.
anyone else.
I can't tell you how many times I had to serve as a psychiatrist or a therapist to domain admins whose accounts were impersonated, leading to major breaches. I mean, this not only affects them professionally, but this affects them psychologically, like down the line. I mean, I have a good friend of mine, one of the companies I worked for years ago, his domain admin account was popped and used to traverse throughout a fairly large company, stealing lots and lots of trade secrets and other things. And when it was all said and done, the investigation was over, and we found out it was his account, and he found out. He was absolutely mortified.
Oh, yeah.
Fair.
So-
Yeah,
and it had
I've
nothing to
never
do with
considered
the
that aspect. The people
Yeah.
aspect there, right? Like if you're the crux of that whole entire thing, yeah, man,
Can
that
you
would
imagine?
crush
Lucky
me.
if
Yeah,
mortified
right.
was the only thing you were.
We should
Yeah,
find
no
those
doubt,
people and
no
invite
doubt.
them on the show and just shame them.
No,
No,
no.
don't
No, I'm
shame
just,
them, because
I'm
here's the
kidding.
thing.
I'm kidding. Oh my goodness.
No,
So-
let me tell you why his password was compromised. They got the the hackers, if you will. I know the organization is a nation state. They were able to do a phishing attack against a VPN user who shouldn't have been a VPN user. They fired up our VPN client. They got into the network, and then they got access to Active Directory because there was no Defender for Identity. Little plug for that technology. And nobody knew that they were in Active Directory, and they dumped the hash tables. And once they dumped the hash tables, they went, okay, who are the DAs here? And they picked the first one in the list, who happened to be my friend. And
no, alphabetical.
yeah, that's all it is. It's not that my friend was reusing passwords, or my friend didn't change his password or make it complicated enough. The password length and complexity absolutely did not matter. Once you have the hash, and you can do a pass the hash, or you can do a golden ticket attack, I don't care what your password is. I don't care if your password's 256 characters long. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah. What happened
I
to
get passionate about
what happened to the future we were looking forward to, where somebody had to cut off your thumb to get access to your stuff?
Well, yeah.
It's
Mission
still
Impossible.
coming,
man.
Rod.
It's still coming. Okay.
Well, that's why I love, like when I joined Microsoft a few years ago, and it's honestly the first organization I've worked for who effectively enabled passwordless. It's such a pleasure to not have to type a password in or change a password every 90 days. And in my personal life, I I pay for a subscription for a password manager, and my wife and I scramble our passwords, and we rely on said password manager to basically assist us with logging in. I don't know my password for anything, right? Except maybe like very core basic things on the internet. Passwords are just, to your point, like we need to move past them, right? And passwordless is easier said than done for some organizations, but when you leverage that sync with our highly prevalent friend Active Directory to the cloud, you can start to like leverage these new capabilities, newish capabilities, in order to achieve that zero trust mindset and move towards passwordless. Kind of take advantage of some of that new capability that Andrea is asking about, like what's new and what can organizations do to really take advantage of these solutions, right? And another new item, I think, you brought up Defender for Identity, which I love, great product, everybody should have it. Do you have Active Directory? Do you not have Defender for Identity? What are you doing, right? Like grab it immediately. The response capabilities, not only for the on-prem side of things, but I know that roadmap wise, we're also looking at Defender for Identity playing on the cloud side of things to work in conjunction with, things like Azure AD identity protection and privileged identity management and things of that nature. So we're constantly coming out with new technologies in this space in order to assist customers with zero trust. Joseph,
well, and that's I think that's kind of a good segue when we talk, going back, and not from a marketing perspective, but going back to the kind of the Microsoft perspective. I think it's important, kind of, how do we cover the different pillars of zero trust? Do we fill all the gaps, or is there still some gaps that remain once a customer has E5 or E3 or whatever?
Well, there might be some gaps. So, I mean, it's kind of a combination of zero trust and defense in depth. And the reason it's a combination is because, quote unquote, the old stuff is not going away, right? You're looking at IoT and OT, that devices that are very expensive, right? Especially in healthcare. And this also happens in manufacturing, because I'm also of that ilk. So you'll have a device that does it's a built for purpose device, but it's running Windows XP, God forbid, but it is, right? So, and the only way to get rid of Windows XP, you don't walk up with a USB image of Windows 10 or 11 and go, I'm just going to install this. No, you can't. It will break the device. So let's say it's a big lathe, right? And you want to get the latest operating system up there and patch all the vulnerabilities on it. You got to buy a new lathe, right? And hopefully it comes with a newer operating system. So those things are still going to be out there. So you're still going to have to do for those types of things that they're on-prem devices that have to stay on the manufacturing line or stay in the distribution center or stay on the hospital operating room floor. You're looking at segmenting networks and doing the perimeter stuff. So you're combining zero trust and kind of those legacy devices where it used to be a username and password would grant you access to a particular network segment so you can get access to those devices. Well, now Zero Trust can do that, right? So now we could do more evaluations on the identity and the device before the individual gains access to that legacy piece of legacy equipment.
All right, no doubt. And did you mention earlier that the healthcare industry also has to rely on older operating systems for
Oh, yeah.
legacy applications? That's a prevalent thing still, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, about
Yeah.
10 years ago, I worked with a forum or a working group that we did a cryptanalysis of one of these hospital systems that basically, when you go into the hospital, let's say you go to the ICU, God forbid, we don't want you in the ICU, but say you're in the ICU and you had a bad case of COVID, you've been intubated, and we got to check your vitals. Well, there's a little machine that sits next to your bedside, and then everything goes back into a central, by the nursing station. All the different patients' stats are displayed at the nursing station. Well, that system that we did a cryptanalysis on was basically under the covers Windows XP, and we found one of the flaws, one of the hundreds of flaws, is that the local administrators group had over 100 identities in it. With various passwords, but some of them repeated. So that was just one of many. The other problem was it wasn't patchable, right? So whatever it rolled off the manufacturing floor with was the version of Windows XP it stayed with throughout its life cycle. So hospitals have to rely on this stuff all over the place, because it's not within a hospital budget to replace these systems every 18 months like we do with laptops.
No doubt. Yeah, I hear that's.
I mean, I used to cover some of the hospitals here in Tampa, and just getting them to patch was a nightmare, much less trying to get them adopt new technology. And even though it's not a technology, new ideas, they tend to be very set in the other ways. But, one of the things that we always ask, Joseph, is how did you get into IT? How did you get into security for people who may still be trying to figure out where they are in the world?
Well, I was a phone freak when I was a kid.
Nice.
There's no bones about it.
You may have to explain what that is to younger people.
Yes, as a kid, I was very, I don't want to use the word obsessed, but I was very interested in the telephones. The telephone, I thought to myself, well, there's got to be more than meets the eye with this thing. Like, how does it work?
And he's talking about phones that were connected to walls, people, like pay phones. And we used to have these phones at our houses, just FYI.
With the long curly cables that go into the other room.
Go ahead, Joseph,
all right.
sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. And I learned different things about how the phone system worked by trial and error, by really collaborating with other people who had the same interests. And one of the ways to collaborate was over those old-fashioned systems called bulletin boards. Now, what a bulletin board was, you'd have a home PC, and you'd have maybe one or two phone lines going into your home, and they would be picked up by a modem. And then basically those people calling into your home would be connected to your Atari 800, your Commodore 64, your whatever it happens to, if you were lucky enough, your PDP-11, which was a mini computer from DEC, if nobody knows what DEC is. But so that's how I got into it. And then as things matured and the industry got more pervasive and client server computing occurred, I got just really, really into, wow, look at all these. I would, do the demon dialing things where, I'd set up a program that would run and dial phone numbers looking for modems, open modems. Some of those modems were password protected. Some of those weren't, right? So sometimes I'd hit a bulletin board system. Sometimes I'd hit a fax machine. Sometimes I'd hit a company or a hospital's network. And then you don't know what you're hitting, and you're just trying to get in. So if you want to see what that is, watch the movie War Games. Matthew Broderick in War Games, he'll show you demon dialing within the first couple of scenes. And that's basically where it all started for me. I was always really interested in how does the telephone network work, and how do other networks work? X25 and ARPANET and all these other types of networks that existed in the past before the internet and TCP/IP were popular. And I did just tons and tons of research. I took a moment or two to get into the medical profession, and then I quickly realized it wasn't for me. And in exiting the medical profession, I was lucky enough to get picked up by IBM, and IBM hired me straight out of the medical field basically on a whim. They asked me a ton of questions about technology to see if I could support AIX and OS2, two very old operating systems. And I did internal IBM support on those two operating systems as my first foray into the IT world.
Nice. I love. You really brought me back with modems and connectivity and whatnot. I wasn't a demon dial. I didn't know that was a term. We did some war driving in our day around the neighborhood for Wi-Fi access points, but I was a little too young for the demon dialing phase. But I love those stories. I love people who come from curiosity, technology backgrounds. I may have also watched another Matthew Broderick movie where he tried to change his grades and attempted to do the same thing, and eventually that leads into a career, right?
So
now
Brody realized that Brody is the youngest one in the room here, right?
Clearly.
He's in our little Brady bunch. So most of what you said just went right over his head. Anyways.
No, I got most of it. And I hear you could get the whistles from the Cracker Jack boxes, and that's how the tones you could make in order to
Yes,
John Draper do that with a raisin
Crunch.
By the way.
Yeah, John Draper, Captain Crunch. Well, there are a lot of other little tricks you could do. I don't think they'll take me to jail anymore for talking about it, because I think a lot of these don't work anymore. But yeah, even Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, before they created Apple, they were running around building out these things called blue boxes. I'm trying to recall exactly what the difference between the blue box, the black box, and the red boxes were. And there were so many boxes out there. But I remember this one trick we had where when you would deposit coins into a payphone, folks, a payphone is a phone that you have to put coins in before you can make a call, because you got to pay for the call. So you would hear this when you put the coins in. Say you put a 25 cents piece in, you'd hear this, or a nickel, you'd hear, or a dime, you'd hear, So you would take a cassette player, a Sony, portable recordable cassette player, not the Walkmans that were only playable, but the ones with the record feature. They were like TSR 5s or whatever, and you'd record that noise, and then you'd pick up the phone again and replay it, and you wouldn't have to put coins in the phone.
Love it.
Yeah.
Or you could steal quarters out of your dad's dresser.
Or you could steal quarters. Yeah.
That's way less fun.
One is you get caught by your dad and you get yelled at. The other is you get caught by the FBI and you're looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison.
Or a job at the time. The old stories of, hey, you've broken in, we want to hire you. It doesn't happen as much anymore, it seems like, but stories like that from the past exist.
It's a good story. It's a good read, but I don't think that happens that often. I was just thinking, Joseph, that you were so interested in how the networks worked. I was more interested with the old BBS at how to get the next free Commander Keen.
Yeah, I kind of missed out on that. I wasn't a big gamer. Because most of my gaming experience at the time was either in the arcades or, the Atari 2600 with the cartridges, or the Intellivision with the cartridges. And to burn a cartridge was a heavy lift, as we say at Microsoft, right? To burn your own. So I kind of missed out on the Doom world. I was off in medical school at that time when Doom was popular. So I didn't have any time to really play games. But my ultimate goal was to really understand SS7 switching. That's basically how telephone calls started to get switched after they got rid of individuals and operators who would sit there at switchboards and, actually literally physically stick a line into a specific, channel to connect your call, right? So we had to rely on automation after that. And it was a pretty incredible piece of engineering, if you think about it. And the other thing, of course, being a kid and being a teenager, we were always pulling pranks. And one of the other things that we used to do just for fun, actually two things. We would call all around, right? So because we can make free phone calls, we would call the Vatican and call the White House, and then I would route my call around the world to somebody who was standing next to me on line 2 and call that number, but call it from around the world, if that makes any sense. So not using the local PBX, but going all around to all these international PBXs to come right back to that call. So everything was echo and delayed. We thought that was fun and cool. We'd create party lines. And then lastly, one thing that really frustrated our friends' parents were we changed the class of service on their home phone lines to payphone.
Oh, wow.
That's great.
That's awesome.
So if you had somebody who wanted to frustrate, you turn their home phone into a payphone, and even though it wasn't physically a payphone, you'd pick it up and it would say, please insert
That's
10 cents
awesome.
or whatever it was.
That's amazing.
So
So IBM essentially hired you because you could get in touch with the Pope, is what you're telling us.
Yeah, well, I wish it was that easy.
He kept ignoring their calls. They're like, we need to talk to this guy.
And,
No,
and dear listeners, we've been reminded to let you all know that we are in no way endorsing any kind of illegal behavior whatsoever.
No,
We are discussing the transgressions of our youth, and we highly recommend that you do not repeat them.
Yeah, I don't even know these people. I've never met them in person.
Oh, okay. I got a follow-up question for Joseph, but I got in trouble trying to install a Trojan in my elementary school computer lab,
Sure.
and the administrator, like, who had a really good relationship up until that point, looks over at me right from her desk, and I'm like, she knows, and so the ability for me to go in and change my grades did not pan out, and I got in big trouble. So anyway, so Joseph, massive technology interest background, grew up through tech and tinkering, and now you're at a stage, and this is a really question that's I'm near and dear to, and I'd love to know your opinion on it. How do you make that next transition to security leadership, to that trusted advisor, where you start talking to the board or you start talking to upper management, and then get to a stage in your career where now, including the history that you've had in your work experience, how do you start having those more high-level conversations and elevating the conversation to business risk, organizational risk, driving value through security versus implement technology X and you'll achieve outcome Y?
Yeah, it's a varied background, right? So I started out trying to get all the experience I absolutely could, So from IBM, I worked for a bank for a little while doing user support, and then I worked for a small company in northern Massachusetts that did manufacturing of sensors, and then I worked for BBN, the company I talked about earlier, and then I went and to do consulting for a while because I just wanted to be exposed to absolutely everything. When you get into a job at some of these companies, you're basically doing the same thing day in and day out, right? The same 1, 2, maybe 7 things. But if you're part of, back in the day, you're part of the Windows NT group, you never got to work with Sun Microsystems or Unix. If you're part of the Sun group, you never got to work with HPUX or HBUX or IBM stuff, right? So I immediately went into consulting. I worked for a consulting company so that I could get exposed to absolutely everything. And it was a lot of fly by the seat of my pants and it was like that for all of us, all of my contemporaries. Pretty much, it was either you knew it or you were going to learn it the weekend before you went to see the customer. So with that, one of my customers actually they tried hiring me for about 5 years, and I kept saying no. You can't pay me enough. I love my autonomy. This is when I had my own consulting firm, and then finally, some things happened in my personal life where I was like, I need a regular 9 to 5. I got to stop traveling as much, and so I worked for this company as an architect, technologist, and I was kind of like I was going to use the analogy to Shell Answer Man, but if you're not in your 50s or 60s, you don't know who that is. But I was like the person people would come to with questions like, would it be possible for us to change our Active Directory domain name? Or how do we integrate this company into our whatever? Or, hey, it looks like, so-and-so chief, chief this or chief that's laptop was compromised. You find out what the heck happened. Can you do the investigation? And over time, I just became known to the business community as kind of one of the go-to people in IT. And that eventually led me to become first a security manager, and then I managed a DBA group. At the same time, I was a security manager, and then our CEO said, what are we doing about security? It was after a number of different incidents occurred. And at the time, IT wasn't putting a lot of money into security. The CEO didn't believe security should reside within the IT realm. So he basically pulled security out as its own group, and we added in risk, compliance, and privacy. And we were one group within the organization. We dotted lines to the CEO, and we straight lined into CILA or legal. We didn't call it CILA. We called it legal.
Gotcha. I gotcha. Excellent.
That's basically how I got moved. But I was always more of a verbal versus a math person anyway. you can see I have a bit of an outgoing personality. You know, as a physician, I was treating patients and I was advising patients, so it wasn't a big leap to advise executives, customers, basically anybody had questions about what do I do next.
All right.
I really just say doctors are IT professionals for the body. So
Yeah, they really are.
Good point.
they're
Good
like, this
point.
looks familiar. I've seen something like this before. Maybe it's a heart attack.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a joke there somewhere. I'm not going there.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of jokes when I'm on the podcast.
Just as long as you're not a proctologist, that's all I care.
Right.
That's a good field to go in because they're rare. They're hard to find.
Yeah.
So, little anecdote. When I was growing up, my best friend at a young age had prostate problems, and he would regularly go to his doctor. His doctor's name, I promise you, was Dr. Butts. And him and I would actually go, and before we'd go out and do things and, you know, go hunt down girls or whatever, we would have to go to his proctologist, and I would be sitting there in the waiting room waiting for him to come out for whatever was going on in there. And it just felt so strange.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good, Rod. That's good. All right, Joe. All right, one more follow-up question on that. So exposure to upper management, to risk, to organization risk, and using what you know around technology. And then so today, if you're talking about getting individuals into security, we know it's not just technology. We know it's also risk, privacy, compliance, like you're talking about. So if you're somebody who and this is a totally self-serving question. So if you're somebody with a large technical background and you want to kind of evolve and make that leap to having, you know, risk, privacy, compliance questions, would you recommend getting more involved with, you know, business education, courses? Is there something outside of core technology security in terms of a learning path that you would recommend to individuals in that state today?
I would never discourage you from learning about the industry in which you're working, right? So if it's not Microsoft and it's not software and services, you know, if it happens to be a manufacturing company or an R&D company or finance or whatever, I would never discourage any potential cybersecurity person from understanding the business in which they work. But to become kind of a jack of all trades and not a master of none, because that wasn't the end of that sentence. Even though I don't know the full thing, it was very flattering. It wasn't jack of all trades and stop at master of none. But anyway, what I was thinking was that just learn everything you can about all aspects of IT, because if you don't know everything as much as possible, not to the L500 level, but maybe to the L300 level, say, you know, from 1 to 5, you know, 100 being the lowest amount you can know about something and 500 being the most you can learn about something. Try and get like a medium knowledge of all of these different technologies, all of these different laws, all of these different policies, how companies run, what the supply chain looks like, what the value chain looks like. You really have to incorporate all of that. That's why I always say it, for cybersecurity, to break into cybersecurity, it's very, very helpful to have a lot of IT and business experience if you want to break in at a certain level. If you want to start from scratch, you know, you can start as a data analyst or a SOC analyst, or, you know, somebody that creates you know, security awareness campaigns, or, you know, basically helps in different ways in deployment projects, etc. And that's a good way to start to get the experiences that you need. And the other thing is, of course, education, but I don't think education ever beats out experience.
Yeah.
Well,
I heard that a lot from hiring managers. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah. And I just going to say, I mean, I think all of what Joseph said is good, but I also think that sounded like a lot. So let's not discourage people. You don't have to become an overnight expert on absolutely everything to just try out something new. You know, I'm a second career person. I did almost 10 years in public relations, undergraduate degree in journalism, and switched into technology and started on a help desk. So your path can go a million different ways, you know.
Yeah.
So if it's something you're interested in, don't think that you can't make that switch.
Well, the key to being interested in is being so driven that you want to learn more and more and more. I mean, the first thing, when IBM gave me a chance, the first thing I did was I took all the free courses that they had available internally. I rated everybody's library. You know, in the different offices, we had people had books and whatnot, and I asked, can I borrow this? Can I borrow that? And I just learned as much as possible, not just about IBM technology, but about all different types of technology. And I kept asking the question, why? Well, why is it like this? Well, why do we do it this way? Understanding the procedures and why we're trying to, reduce the risk of fraud and reduce the risk of any kind of maliciousness, and this is the reason we do what we do.
Cool. That's well put. Yeah.
Awesome.
Be a lifelong learner. Our future guest, Ann Johnson, on February 1st, which we're going to plug the blank out of leading up until that because we're really excited. She has a podcast called Afternoon Cyber Tea, and just recently released an episode where she was speaking with a longtime CISO advisor. I forget the gentleman's name off the top of my head. Pardon me, that individual. And being a lifelong learner, not only in the current field that you're interested in, but other potential fields, is an extremely important trait to have. It's not a static industry. We're constantly having to change our mindsets. And to Andrea's point, coming from, I didn't know you came from a PR background. That's really cool. We need everyone coming from different backgrounds, regardless if it's technology or legal or health, physician, right? Like here's a great smattering of people just on this show right now who come from different backgrounds and are excelling in security careers. So yeah, don't feel like there's only one path. And I had imposter syndrome and like nervousness in my career trying to think like, oh, I need a big development background if I want to be a security guy. But there's so many different aspects to cybersecurity. Your backgrounds and your unique experiences are what we need in the industry. So yeah, come on in. We need everyone.
It's great, Brody.
Yeah.
Shout out Laird Farbs. Congrats for starting your new cybersecurity career.
Yeah, we had someone in chat. That's amazing. Absolutely. Laird Farbs. Yeah, can't pronounce anything. Yeah, starting their cybersecurity career on Monday, and they've joined our show today. So there you go. People are already taking advantage and joining a very booming industry day in and day out. That's really cool. It's really cool.
We need a lot of people.
Yeah.
Oh, and yeah, that's what I was going to kind of say. This industry, or at least this profession, there's a lot of room, a lot of room for people. It's security, obviously, is booming. I came all the way from selling computers, the old nice, 386X and 286 and all that good kind of stuff. Actually, as a computer salesperson, all the way through to what I do today. So it's pretty interesting to kind of look back on a career like that. But you can literally come from anywhere. You don't have to be stuck in whatever profession. Andrea, I said it right that time, actually mentioned about trying out new things. You're going to find pretty quickly when you try new things what resonates, right? So even at Microsoft, I know a lot of things, but I also know that there's this path, the path of least resistance. If somebody says, "Hey, Rod, can you do this?" I'm like, I'm absolutely going to do that, so I don't have to go do those other things that are a little bit more difficult. But you will find things that resonate, and that becomes like your skill or your skill set. And we would absolutely appreciate more people in these roles. It's definitely needed.
Before we wrap up, since you sold computers, did the turbo button actually make the computer faster? Okay. All right.
Yeah. It gave it a little bit more electricity, but it really didn't do anything.
A little bit more electricity. That
Yeah,
sounds safe.
about
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Hey,
No,
Joseph,
liked that one.
I don't think
Yes,
we
sir.
talked about this, but what is your current, and I think people find this interesting, people that are outside Microsoft. What is your current title, and what are you supposed to do as part of that title? Nobody at Microsoft does exactly what their title says, but
So it's Chief Security Advisor. I work with health and life sciences customers to basically educate them, right? As they're trying to make decisions around the architecture of their environments, make decisions on how to secure, protect, defend, respond. And sometimes just answer some of the tough questions, right? Many of our customers in health and life sciences are under some sort of regulatory compliance restriction. In the manufacturing world, we've got certain restrictions around, manufacturing medical devices or manufacturing lab equipment, and the FDA oversees all of that. So there are specific ways you have to do it. Of course, you have medical information and personal health information. If you're a medical provider, you you have to collect that, patient notes and so forth in order to get the history of the patient, but you also have to collect that. So you're not, data owner in that respect. So a data processor, et cetera. And then, we've got manufacturing systems that are always under ransomware threats. So I talk to those companies about how to reduce the risk of ransomware infecting their networks, kind of taking over what they're doing. So it just spans. I'm basically a Swiss Army knife when it comes to talking about compliance, risk, security, laws that you need to abide by, how to pass audits, and then how to really use the Microsoft stack to hit those goals.
And that's your day-to-day role. And then on top of that, I'm sure there's other things that you're not mentioning that you do. I'm sure you mentor individuals. I'm sure you're involved in internal and external communities, right? So it's not just your title and your role, but you wear all kinds of different hats, and it depends on where your passions are. And what I think is the heart of what Rod was getting at. There's your role and your title and your job, but then there's also those other great things that you're good at that intrinsically make you that unique skill set individual, that Swiss Army knife that people can rely on.
Yeah, I love writing. I love posting to LinkedIn. I haven't been so great over the last month, but I started up again 2 days ago and posting. I'm constantly trying to keep on top of those things. I've got a number of people that I do mentor. They're not all with Microsoft, and people I've been close to over the years that are looking to either change a career or advance in their career. I'm involved in all kinds of security groups outside of work. I do a lot of volunteering, and then I'm always, when people find out I'm in security, hey, help secure our network, especially if they're a nonprofit. Are we doing things correctly? What technologies should we be using? Those types of things.
Yeah, that's really cool. Would you recommend that? Would you recommend getting on the boards of some nonprofits and giving back some time, help for your diverse experiences? Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be at the board level. I mean, you could just roll up your sleeves and help these people figure out how to use Google Drive or something. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Microsoft specific or business specific. It could just be hey, are you guys using multi-factor authentication? There's an organization up the road that it's a very small organization, religious-based organization. I'm helping, the rabbi and the individuals there, basically secure the systems that they use to, put on Sabbaths and whatnot, Shabbat.
Cool. Yeah, that's all. I'm really happy to hear you give back in many different levels. That's awesome. Yeah, what a great conversation. It was really great getting to know you, Joseph. I know we're at time. We don't want to keep people from dinner. When Edward, our co-host, is on, his wife right now would be very upset because he's 10 minutes past and it's dinner time.
He probably still is.
He probably still is. Hopefully we're not keeping you from dinner, but I just want to say it was awesome getting to know you. So originally, listeners, there's an internal Microsoft security community, and I was plugging the show looking for guests, and Joseph reached out, and immediately just his background and title and everything is immediately impressive. I'm like, oh, I'd love to have this individual on. And so we made it work. And now we've got another great network connection on the show. We'd love to have you back one day. We'd love to talk about various different topics with you eventually in future episodes. And thank you. Just thank you for making the time to come on and share with our listeners and our viewers today. This was a wonderful conversation.
Yep.
And likewise, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege.
We're also supposed to shout out, or supposed to not forget to mention, that Festive Tech Calendar with Richard Hooper and Gregor Sutty starts the 1st of December. Rod was already on top of it.
Hey, well, so my session is like the 28th or 29th. So everybody's going to be waiting for New Year's Eve, and they won't even care. Rod's doing a session. I don't care. So. Yeah.
Come on, Rod. I'm going to check it out. I didn't know it was a thing until just this second. So
yeah. Every year they do this. It's the 31 days. Yeah, there's a session literally every day for a month.
Cool. It's an advent calendar.
Yeah. It's almost like the advent calendar.
Awesome. I love advent calendars, whether it's beer or chocolate. And now the festive tech calendar. That's great. Wonderful.
For any Microsoft listeners going to the Airlift next week, I'm presenting 2 sessions, one on KQL and one on stories from the field. So join us at the Airlift next week.
Where is the Airlift, by the way?
Online.
Oh, okay. All right.
Rod.
Ron, you're the only one that gets to go anywhere. All the
Yeah.
rest of us stay home.
Sorry. Sorry.
Rod,
I
I'm going to
thought-
Redmond next week. Not a big deal. Like, yeah, I'm going to my living room in an hour. You know, yeah.
Well, I just thought if you were going to be there, then okay. Forget
I
it.
would love to see you, friend.
Rod, if you can ever
Absolutely.
get us out anywhere, you're our guy. You're the person
You
who knows
know,
the people.
things will improve eventually. I
Yeah.
truly have faith that things will improve eventually. We'll see some of those travel dollars, maybe after the Activision acquisition. I don't know.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Joseph,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
are you physically? Did you say?
I'm in Boston, or just
Boston.
north of Boston.
Got it. All right.
Bruins are killing it this year. I don't know if you're a hockey guy, but they're always killing
I'm
it.
not, so it's good to know. I learned something.
Yeah. Boston always wins all the championships anyway, no matter what the sport. So you're
All right,
guys
Andrew,
are
you want to
doing
close
good.
us out? Tell everybody.
Yeah.
Sure. Once again, everyone, thanks for joining us on our podcast/show. We'll be back next week. Who's joining us next week?
I don't know.
Really put me on the
Brody.
spot there. Pulling that up now. Do. Thanks, Andrea. Thanks for teeing
I
me
promise
up
you it'll
there.
be somebody good. Never mind.
Yeah,
Don't worry about it.
It's gonna be.
Just make up something. Hurry.
We actually don't have anybody for December 7th.
All
So
right.
to be determined. Thanks, Andrea, for teeing
All
me
right.
up
Sorry,
on that
guys.
one.
TBD, but it'll be
TBD.
good. We
All right.
promise.
All right.
Joseph, if you know anybody, yeah, let us know.
You have any friends?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everyone.
everybody.
All
Talk to you
right.
next week.
Take
Good
care.
night.
Thanks.
Take care.